The bronze doors of the temple did not simply close. They were erased from history, leaving behind a map etched in a metal that refused to decay. In 1952, inside a cave overlooking the Dead Sea, archaeologists pulled a heavy, oxidized roll of copper from the dust, a relic that immediately stood at odds with every other parchment found in the Qumran ruins. While the other Dead Sea Scrolls spoke of spirits, light, and the end of days, the copper scroll spoke of weight, depth, and precise coordinates for 64 hidden caches of immense wealth. It is not a religious text, but a cold, industrial blueprint for a treasure so massive it would bankrupt modern economies. Yet, the deeper scholars look into these directions, the more they encounter a chilling realization. The map doesn't just lead to gold. It points toward vaults containing objects that, by all logic of the first century, should not have existed. The conflict began the moment the scroll was found. It was too brittle to unroll, its secrets trapped behind layers of corroded metal. For years, it sat in a laboratory, a silent witness to a mystery that threatened to rewrite the history of the Levant. When scientists finally used a specialized saw to cut it into 23 strips to reveal the interior, they didn't find the expected leather or papyrus. They found nearly pure copper, an expensive and difficult medium to work with during that era. Whoever commissioned this document wasn't looking for a temporary record. They were creating a message intended to survive 1,000 years of war, erosion, and the slow grind of tectonic plates. The text was hammered into the metal with a violence that suggests urgency, using a dialect of Hebrew that had not been spoken for centuries, mixed with Greek ciphers that still baffle cryptographers today. Every character is a scar on the metal, a permanent indentation made by someone who was running out of time. The sheer scale of the treasure described is the first point of contention. The scroll lists quantities of gold and silver measured in talents, a weight that would total over 160 tons. To put that in perspective, that is more gold than was thought to be in circulation in the entire Roman Empire at the time. This leads to a dangerous contradiction. If the treasure is real, where did it come from? Some hypothesize it was the tithe of the Second Temple, hidden before the Roman legions could sack Jerusalem in 70 AD. But others point to the descriptions of the caches themselves. These are not merely holes in the ground. They are described as subterranean chambers, some reinforced with bitumen and stone, located in areas that remain geographically unstable or geologically anomalous. The text describes depths that would require modern excavation equipment to reach, yet it treats these locations as accessible to those who know the key. As explorers attempted to follow the directions, they hit a wall of silence and physical impossibility. The scroll mentions a double-bottomed vessel buried near a specific watercourse, containing writings and instruments. In archaeological terms, instruments usually refers to tools or ritual objects, but the context here is unsettling. There are mentions of vessels of silver and gold that are not of this world, a phrase that has been cautiously translated by some as referring to the craftsmanship, while others believe it hints at a far more disturbing origin. These objects are described as being housed in the pit of the resonance, a location that has never been definitively mapped. When researchers visit the suggested coordinates, they don't find ancient ruins. They find areas where the air feels heavy, where the local magnetic fields fluctuate without explanation, and where the desert seems to have swallowed the very landmarks the scroll relies upon. The danger of this knowledge became evident during the mid-20th century excavations. Several teams who claimed to have found the starting point of the map suddenly had their funding pulled or were denied access to the sites by local authorities, citing security concerns. There is a tension between the public face of archaeology and the private interests of those who monitor the Dead Sea region. The conflict isn't just about gold. It's about the potential for finding something that disrupts the established timeline of human development. If the instruments mentioned in the scroll are indeed out-of-place artifacts, objects showing signs of advanced metallurgy or unknown energy signatures, the implications would be catastrophic for our understanding of the past. The fear is not that the treasure is gone, but that it is still there, and that it represents a level of power that we are not yet prepared to manage. Consider the Cave of the Column, one of the most prominent locations mentioned in the text. According to the scroll, a massive cache lies beneath the base of a specific pillar. When researchers investigated the site, they found evidence of sophisticated mining techniques that seemed far too advanced for the technology available to the Essene sect traditionally associated with the scrolls. The shafts were perfectly circular, cut through solid rock with a precision that suggests thermal or mechanical tools beyond the capability of hand chisels. The walls were not chipped, they were fused, as if the rock had been melted away. Yet, the official reports remain vague, often dismissing these anomalies as natural erosions or later Roman modifications. This dismissal only fuels the friction between independent researchers and an academic establishment that seems increasingly desperate to keep the copper scroll within the bounds of traditional history. The mystery deepens when we examine the chemical composition of the copper itself. Analysis has shown traces of rare earth elements that are not typically found in the copper mines of the Araba Valley. This suggests the material for the scroll was either imported from a vast distance or processed using a method that refined the metal to a degree of purity that should have been impossible for the era. Why go to such lengths for a treasure map? Unless the map itself was meant to be a part of the technology it describes, a durable, conductive material capable of surviving environmental shifts that would have destroyed any other medium. Some have suggested the scroll was not just meant to be read, but to be used as a physical component in the very vaults it describes, a copper key for a copper door. There is also the matter of the 64th item. At the end of the list, the scroll mentions that a duplicate of this very document, along with an explanation, is buried in a separate location, in the pit of the silver. This implies that the map we have is only half of the puzzle, a cipher without its key. Without the second scroll, the measurements and directions remain a series of riddles. Some believe the second scroll contains the how rather than the where, the instructions on how to access or activate whatever is contained within the deeper vaults. The search for this second document has become a quiet, desperate race behind the scenes of international diplomacy, involving entities that have little to do with history and everything to do with the acquisition of power. The desert is no longer just a site of ancient ruins. It is a chessboard for those who believe the second scroll holds the secret to an ancient advantage. In the shadows of the Qumran cliffs, the air is thick with the weight of what hasn't been found. Reports of subterranean sonar scans in the region have detected massive, hollow structures deep beneath the desert floor, structures that do not align with any known ancient tomb or city. These anomalies remain unexcavated, protected by layers of bureaucratic red tape and military exclusion zones that seem to expand whenever a new discovery is rumored. The question is no longer whether the treasure exists, but rather, what kind of treasure requires a map made of metal and 1,000-year silence? We are looking at a record of a civilization that possessed a terrifying clarity of purpose, a group of people who knew that their world was ending and chose to bury their most dangerous truths in the one material that would survive the fire. The scroll mentions a site called the Vale of Acor, a place traditionally associated with trouble and judgment. It is here, the text claims, that the most significant items are kept under a stone that speaks. While some scholars dismiss this as religious metaphor, the technical tone of the rest of the scroll suggests a more literal interpretation. Imagine a stone that emits a frequency, a rhythmic hum that can be felt in the marrow of the bone before it is heard by the ear. When independent researchers have attempted to use acoustic sensors in the valley, they have reported dead zones where sound refuses to travel, and hotspots where a low-frequency vibration seems to emanate from the ground itself. This is the friction between archaeology and the impossible. The speaking stone may not be a legend, but a landmark for a technology that uses sound as a barrier or a beacon. As the sun sets over the Judean wilderness, the shadows of the caves stretch out like fingers, pointing toward the locations etched into that oxidized metal. The scroll remains in a museum, a series of severed strips behind glass, but its message continues to vibrate through the halls of power. The map is there. The coordinates are clear. The conflict remains. We are standing on the edge of a discovery that could shatter our perception of time itself, led by a 2,000-year-old ghost made of copper. The scrolls found nearby tell us to prepare for the end of the world, but the copper scroll tells us that the world has already ended many times, and each time, something was left behind. Consider the physical experience of those who hammered these words into the metal. The sheer force required to indent copper of that thickness suggests a person or a machine working with mechanical precision. There are no mistakes in the text, no crossed-out letters, no slips of the stylus. It is a document of absolute certainty. This certainty is what makes the instrument so frightening. If the gold is real, and the weight of the scroll itself suggests that the people who made it had access to vast resources, then the instruments that are not of this world must also be real. We are talking about objects that were buried with the same care as the wealth of a nation. These were not discarded. They were placed in reinforced chambers, sealed with bitumen to keep out the air, and hidden under landmarks designed to last for millennia. The search for the 64th item continues in the dark. There are rumors of private excavations funded by anonymous billionaires, of tunnels dug in the dead of night away from the eyes of the authorities. These seekers are not looking for gold coins to put in a museum. They are looking for the explanation mentioned in the final lines of the scroll. They are looking for the manual. If the vaults contain technology that predates our understanding of the Iron Age, vessels that can withstand the pressure of the earth or stones that can speak across the vacuum of time, then the person who finds the second scroll won't just be the richest person on earth. They will be the master of a history that was never supposed to be rediscovered. The conflict of the copper scroll is the conflict of our own relevance. We want to believe that we are the pinnacle of human achievement, that the people of the first century were primitive, driven by superstition and simple tools. But the copper scroll is a cold, hard piece of evidence that says otherwise. It is a message from a past that was far more complex, far more dangerous, and far more connected to the unknown than we are willing to admit. It suggests that while civilizations rise and fall, there are certain things, technologies, records, or perhaps even entities that remain constant, tucked away in the crust of the earth, waiting for the right key to be turned. The mystery of the Dead Sea was never just about the fragments of the Bible. It was about the one scroll that refused to be a book. The copper scroll stands as a paradox. It is a physical object, handled by scholars, photographed, and displayed, yet it points toward a reality that feels like a fever dream. If the caches are ever opened, we may find the gold and silver as promised, but the instruments and vessels mentioned alongside them might force us to confront a version of our ancestors that was far more sophisticated, or far more connected to something else than we have ever dared to imagine. Until that day, the map remains a dangerous riddle, a sequence of coordinates leading into the dark heart of a desert that refuses to give up its most terrifying secrets. It is a reminder that some things are buried not to be saved, but to be forgotten until a time when they can no longer stay hidden. Every year, the wind shifts the sands of the Vale of Achor, and every year, the sensors in the region pick up that same low-frequency hum. The speaking stone is waiting. The double-bottomed vessels are still there, encased in their bitumen seals, protected by the very earth that was supposed to consume them. The institutional silence surrounding these sites only confirms the stakes. This isn't just history, it's a ticking clock. The copper is corroding, but the message is still legible. The instructions are still valid. The 64 caches are out there, and the 64th item, the key to it all, is buried somewhere just out of reach, waiting for a hand that knows how to hold it. We are the inheritors of a map we cannot yet read, looking for a treasure we might not truly want to find. The mystery of the copper is not that it exists, but that it was ever allowed to be found at all. It is a silent alarm, a metallic warning sent through time. As we strip away the layers of the past, we must ask ourselves, If the doors described in the copper scroll finally swing open, will we find our heritage? Or will we find the reason our ancestors were so desperate to hide it in the first place? The desert is vast, the metal is cold, and the truth is buried deep beneath the stone that speaks. The countdown began 2,000 years ago, and the map is still pointing the way into the dark. The air near the proposed cache sites often feels static, as if the ground itself is holding a charge. Local legends speak of lights seen hovering over the ravines, and animals that refuse to cross certain lines drawn in the sand. These are not the marks of a simple treasury. This is the footprint of something that interacts with the environment on a fundamental level. When the copper was hammered, it wasn't just to list wealth, it was to preserve a legacy of power. We often mistake silence for absence, but in the Judean wilderness, the silence is active. It is a barrier constructed of time and stone. As researchers continue to digitize the scroll and apply new cryptographic models to the Greek ciphers, the tension between what is known and what is suspected grows. The ciphers don't align with any known military code of the Roman or Jewish forces. They appear more like mathematical constants or coordinates for celestial alignments. This suggests that the treasure is not just hidden in the earth, but synchronized with it. To find the caches, one might not just need a shovel, but a specific moment in time. The map is a living thing, waiting for the world to reach a certain level of understanding or a certain level of desperation. The final question remains: who is the scroll for? It was not left in a library, it was hidden in a cave, intended to be found only after the world that created it had been burned to ash. It is a message for the survivors. If we are those survivors, we must decide if we are ready to open the copper doors. The 64 caches represent a choice. We can remain in the safety of our established history, or we can follow the scars on the metal into a future that looks hauntingly like the deep past. The stone continues to speak in its low, rhythmic hum, a heartbeat in the desert floor, reminding us that the truth is never truly gone. It is simply waiting for the silence to break.